In our series from the Charity Learning Consortium, today I am really pleased to be speaking to Mencap. We've got Matthew Perkins with us, and Matthew's going to be talking us through their learning and what they have learned from their learning offer to their colleagues, particularly in the engagement angle. Now, this is a challenge that all of us have in learning and development. How do we engage our learners, and how do we keep them engaged? How do we know that what we provide really works? So let's hand over to Matthew and learn a little bit about both him and the charity, but the work that they've done. Welcome to Learning Now TV, Matthew. It's fantastic for you to join us today. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about Mencap?
Yes, I work with a wonderful organisation called Mencap, and we have the aim to make the UK the best place for people with a learning disability to live happy and healthy lives. And we do that in lots and lots of different ways, through fundraising, activism, working directly with people with a learning disability, lots and lots of different things.
Good. And it sounds to me like you should be proud of your learning offer. In preparation for our interview today, I've been reading about how you've shifted from face-to-face to digital. Now, this is a journey that many organisations, both the third sector, public sector, and also the private sector have had to take. But you've been doing this now since 2018, is that right? Okay, so at 2018, what was the driver? What decided, why would Mencap move to a digital learning offer or a broader learning offer than just face-to-face?
I was brought in 2018 as Mencap's first digital learning manager, and it was part of a digital transformation programme. So before I joined Mencap, a lot of work had been done, listening to mainly a lot of the people that worked out in our services, that supported people with a learning disability, to really understand, how they do their jobs and what was the barriers to people doing their jobs. And we found very quickly, there was lots of things happening in lots of different ways, not just about learning, but about, working practice and ways of working and how different people were doing things. So there was a massive driver to really, understand our people better, about how they work, how they learn, and how those two things interact with each other. And it was identified quite quickly that there was a massive opportunity with digital learning to really help our workforce to work better, to learn better, and to ultimately help us to do what we set out to do, which, as I've just said, is at the end of the day about improving the lives of people with a learning disability. So that's why that was brought about. And when I joined Mencap, before then, it was predominantly face-to-face learning. It was face-to-face learning people loved. People really enjoyed. They really engaged with it. There were some real successes there. But yeah, it was seen that we needed to approach things in a different way. We employ around 7,000 people, and just at scale, just being able to deliver everything face to face is not something that's very simple to do, or very simple to do effectively or cost effectively as well. So that's why I was brought on board. And yeah, when I joined, we were doing PowerPoint presentations as really simple early versions of digital learning, that people would either sit or work through themselves. They were not interactive, they were quite long. There was no real consistency in terms of how they were put together, and it wasn't really easy to measure people's engagement with them, or what people got out of them, or what people had learned through doing those things. So yeah, it was quickly identified that digital learning was a real opportunity to really help drive us forward in what we want to do and what we want to achieve.
Great to hear so many elements there of your story. You listened to people, you identified the barriers, you smashed through those barriers. And I'm loving that you're talking about, it's not just about the learning, it was the working practice. What are people doing in work? 7,000 people is a lot of people to reach with somewhat of a boring bullet pointed PowerPoint. So you moved to a digital setup, and you use content from our sponsors, the Charity Learning Consortium. Now, I understand that when you launched this in 2019, there was about 30,000 interactions, 30,000 course completions, and then moving into last year, over 100,000 course completions on that content. Now, all the L&Ders listening to our interview today will know that who cares, Matt? Who cares about course completions? Because whilst the content is fab from the CLC, and whilst it obviously was impactful in your organisation in terms of numbers, the real impact of learning content, particularly digital learning content, comes from behaviour change, something that's done differently as a result. Can you talk us through, how do you know that all of those course completions have made any difference whatsoever in your organisation?
I'm a big advocate and champion of digital learning. I really am. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that digital learning on its own is rarely the answer. It's always part of an answer. It's always part of something that can be really meaningful and can really help bring change and impact. And I think what it comes down to is it comes down to learning design. It comes down to learning experience design, and actually how you build a piece of learning or identify a piece of learning or a program. What it comes down to is really making sure that at the very start, before you just pick a course off the shelf or you create something yourself, it's really about understanding what it is that you want that learning to achieve, what it is that you want that learning to help people to do differently, and how you know that that change has been achieved. And it's about working with people in the business and across the organization to really help them to understand what change is needed and how we know that that change has actually come about and how that learning has helped that to come about. Because, as you've rightly said, it's fantastic that we've got engagement with digital learning. We know that people are completing it. But yeah, we know that people like it we use Net Promoter Score to really find out what people thought about it and how likely that they're going to be able to use that to help them to do what they need to do. But it's about thinking about digital learning as part of the overall program. So say, for example, you take something like, medicines administration. So we use digital learning as part of that learning that people need to do. We know that some shadowing or observation needs to happen to help them to understand a bit in terms of context what medicines is all about. People will complete some digital learning to help them to get the basics of it. We ask them a simple assessment questions within there to make sure that they are retaining that information, and then they go out and they try it. They have a go. There's digital resources that are there to help them to understand things at the point of need. And then we know that it's actually made a difference when it comes to the observation in the workplace. We know that a service manager is able to observe somebody doing what they need to do and apply that learning as part of their role. So it's at that point of assessment, with that as an example of how we know that that learning has had impact. As soon as they've completed that digital course, yes, we ask, was that useful? Will it help you within your role? Also, is there anything that we can do to make it better, to make it simpler for you, a lot clearer for you? And we don't just look at the score at that point, the Net Promoter Score, which kind of gives us an indication. We look at a lot of the qualitative kind of information that sits underneath that as well to help us improve what we do. But it's not until that end point where we know that that person in the workplace is able to apply that as part of their role, that learning has actually made a difference. And it's about thinking about that whole learning experience, not just those single pieces of learning, that we actually understand the impact that learning can make.
Brilliant. The engagement that you clearly do have and have generated, is not surprising, because you've got great content, you've got a great strategy around your approach as well. Is there any final thoughts, Matt, that you want to share with everyone with regards to that engagement piece? How do you encourage people to engage? I mean, from 30,000 to 100,000 in just a few years, that's a lot of engagements. Any top tips just as we end our interview today?
I think a lot of it is about to to be really people-centered and people-focused throughout your whole use of learning. So, right from when a need is identified, right through to when it's created, developed, delivered, implemented, evaluated, to really involve people throughout the organization at each part of those processes, not just to build something and to put it out there and say, here you go, here's some learning, we expect you to complete that. But people throughout the organization can be real champions of digital learning. And, it's not just about, finding the people who love digital and, are likely to say good things about it. It's about finding people that initially are quite resistant to it as well, and working with them to understand the benefit and to learn from those people about what the challenges are of actually completing things like digital learning within the workplace, and to really work in partnership with them, using working with those people, using different channels within the organization in terms of communication, not just email, not just things like Yammer, but using lots of different things to kind of help people to really see the so what of getting engaged and involved with doing digital learning, sharing stories, sharing videos of people about how they've actually been able to put the learning into practice and what they've thought of it. Real life examples of how it's helped them to do things can really help to build engagement with things like that. And as well, a massive thing is developing with people. It doesn't just help with engagement. It helps you to know that it's accessible. It helps you to know that people in your organization can see themselves in the learning that you're developing and putting out there, which is a really, really important thing to do if you want people to engage with it.
Brilliant. I've really enjoyed hearing your story today. Thank you for sharing it with us on Learning Now TV. Until next time, everybody, where we hear another story from a third sector organisation. Aren't they great? They've got so many things to share with us, and I look forward to sharing them with you. Thanks very much, Matthew.